I did something quite weird for me when Mickey Arthur became the coach of Sri Lanka. I reached out to him to let him know how much I rated their T20 talent. And part of the reason I did it is just because I felt like so few people had actually noticed that there was a lot of good T20 players in Sri Lanka.
This is the last knock. When was the first knock? Don't know.
And that's because T20 cricket in Sri Lanka has been a clusterfuck of a shit show of a dumpster fire for some time now. Of course, this all started with the Sri Lanka Premier League, which from the very moment we heard of its existence seemed like a terrible idea. There are reports of a 25-year deal with a company called Somerset Entertainment Ventures. The company who got the TV rights did not possess broadcast facilities at that time, and the board thought for some reason that all the Indian players would come and play in this tournament for them. The first year was postponed, which is never a good sign. The second season went ahead, however, and there were plenty of stories about no payments. There was no third season, so that second year was the only actual year of the Sri Lankan Premier League. I visited Sri Lanka around this point and spent a little time with the SLC president and other board members and high-ranking officials, and honestly, I'm surprised they managed to even get a single season up. For instance, I met the president because me and Sam Collins were wearing these suits. It was a pretty shoddy organisation at that point, and that tournament just, disappeared. And nothing of any note replaced it. In fact, between that one limp season and 2020, the best T20 League in Sri Lanka was arguably a fake one played in India, using actors pretending to be Sri Lankan cricketers for a match-fixing syndicate in India. Sadly, it was better organised than many of the Sri Lankan T20 tournaments. Not having a top-tier T20 professional league has had massive impacts on Sri Lankan cricket. Firstly, these leagues do make some money, and they also allow for at least a sense of future-proof against the often rocky nature of international cricket. Now, I don't think this league and its weird organisational structure and TV rights deal was ideal, but not replacing it with a decent alternative was even worse. It meant that their national team had to play more, because without a strong franchise league, they couldn't guarantee any income outside of internationals. And when you're playing more than England, it's a stupid thing to do. This is the 5 years before COVID. There is almost nothing good that ever comes from playing this much international cricket. They also lost a lot at this point. They were among the most losingest team. I mean, they were better than Zimbabwe and they just edged out West Indies, but this was pretty bad. And this certainly shows that this has been a weak playing era for Sri Lanka, regardless of T20 cricket. But that's also the absolute worst time to have no quality domestic league for your T20 players. What happens is your top-end players don't get noticed as much because they just don't play. And they don't end up with great numbers from starring at home. So the high-end players from Sri Lanka haven't really league-hopped, outside of the high-end players that were known beforehand, guys like Malinga and Pereira. And that's because the rest of the players are relying on their international numbers, and they can be a bit random. And often you're used out of your normal position. Plus there's no way of playing just that much international T20. But they have had players with obvious T20 talent, like Kusal Pereira and Niroshan Dickwalla and Dhananjaya De Silva, Dushmantha Chimera, Lakshan Sandakan and Akila Dhananjaya. But most of them haven't developed or played enough in other leagues, and they've had nothing at home. They've just sort of stagnated. So that is one reason why this Sri Lankan team had to qualify or play the first round, but qualify really, isn't it? Many of their best players have natural talent, but not the development of home league or the experience of the away leagues. So their T20 cricket in the last 5 years before this World Cup has been just horrible. This is the top 200 run scorers in T20 over the last 5 years for internationals and major T20s. I've highlighted all the Sri Lankan players here. And by all, I mean their big hitting all-rounder Pereira and the now retired Kumar Sangakkara. And I did check the bowlers too. Of the top 200 wicket takers, there are 3 Sri Lankans. While this is a problem for their elite talent, not having a league at home also means that their younger players haven't been able to develop either. They don't get the ability to play in strong leagues. They haven't hung out in dressing rooms with top Sri Lankan players or overseas talent. They don't have the experience of preparing for a fully professional league, or just the ability to play an extra amount of games under pressure while developing their skills, learning their roles, all these sorts of normal things that T20 players around the world do all the time. A young player in South Africa or Bangladesh over the last few years has been a huge advantage over a Sri Lankan player. And not that the franchise system is perfect. Owners cause a problem for boards, and running your own competition can be tricky, as Cricket Australia has found. Even India, with the best league in the world of the IPL, have issues. There is no perfect solution. The West Indies players go off and learn everything about T20 in the free market, but are often overworked and play injured because they've not got the support of a wealthy board. But for a long time, Sri Lanka would have actually been wishing for those problems. They didn't have a good local league or their best players travelling. Now, it would be a dead set lie to say that there haven't been other issues with Sri Lankan cricket outside of just not having a league. Their cricketers were clearly not exactly behaving well at times, and their board is still obviously a problem, as it has been for, quite some time now. I mean, they lost one captain when he stood up to them over contracts, and they rewarded another captain for being on their side in the negotiations. It's not ideal, but there is talent in Sri Lankan cricket, and this tournament has proven that again. They lost to South Africa, but Kimber was incredible, taking out both their openers. Dikshana has had a tournament-long economy of 5.5, and he gave them some early hope against Australia. And Hasaranga and Rajapaksa have had good tournaments as well, including beating Bangladesh when, let's be honest, it looked like that game was completely gone. And I'm kind of bearing the lead here, aren't I? Because there is one player who's just obvious when it comes to talent. Hasaranga. Back in 2019, I was watching a New Zealand-Sri Lanka T20 when I saw a bloke make a few runs at the death, and then he came out to bowl and just delivered incredible leg spin that the New Zealanders just could not work out. Straight away, I contacted an agent friend of mine to ask if he was on their books. It was clear that Hasaranga was hiding in plain sight, a top-level T20 franchise talent. There's a lot of T's in that. But he was right there, and no one had really noticed him, and that's because he hadn't swept up any leagues, because he hadn't played in any leagues, because at that stage Sri Lanka did not have a proper league. I think what we know about him now is that he's a top-quality leg spinner who can hit. There aren't that many top-quality leg spinners around, and there are far fewer who could also hit. That is a T20 star. In this tournament, he almost beat England on his own with bat and ball. He put the South African game into a position that Sri Lanka shouldn't have lost, and Australia couldn't hit him. And let's be honest, the Netherlands don't even want to be reminded that he exists. This is clearly an incredible player. And he's that good that obviously he's going to travel the world and play in other leagues to develop. In fact, he's already popped his head into the IPL with his mate Kimber. But not all the Sri Lankan players are that obviously talented or that in demand. So that is where the local league will be important. And considering that Sri Lanka had to host the first season of the Lanka Premier League in lockdown, I thought they did a pretty good job, even if they played on the tiniest grounds ever. Sri Lankan cricket just needs this league to work. As for what's happened to them in this tournament, well, there are two ways to look at it. Owen Morgan has said that they played above their weight. I would say that they are 4-0 against teams that they went in as favourites against, and 0-3 against the ones they were underdogs for. But they did push England more than anyone else. And yes, the toss and Mills quad strain certainly helped them there. But despite being completely out of the running by the time they even got to that England game, they had their moments. But they've had their moments for a long time. I think Sri Lankan fans are a bit over moments at this point. Talent and the odd good performance is not what Sri Lankan fans want. There have been moments like this in the last few years for them. The difference now is that with the Lankan Premier League, there is a structure as well. Hasaranga has proven again that there will always be incredible talent coming out of Sri Lankan cricket. Now it's time to make a system that helps actually nurture and develop it.